U.S. coalition planes in Syria as targets after the U.S. shot down a Syrian Air Force jet west of the Euphrates. Let's go to Kristen Fisher in Washington with the very latest. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Trish. Well, to give you an idea of how big a deal this is, the last time the U.S. shot down a warplane in air-to-air combat was almost 20 years ago. Now the U.S. has shot down a Syrian plane for the first time ever. And the Russians who support Syria's President Bashar al-Assad are warning Washington that any U.S. or U.S.-led coalition planes that fly west of the Euphrates River in Syria will be considered targets. Now, the Russians didn't explicitly say that they would shoot them down, but still, this marks a major escalation over a battlefield that was already very chaotic and confusing. Now, the Russians have also threatened to stop using the deconfliction hotline. Remember, they've threatened that in the past, and this afternoon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said the U.S. will try to reestablish that line sometime in the next few hours.
I'm confident that we are still communicating between our operations center and the Russian Federation Operations Center, and I'm also confident that our forces have the capability to take care of themselves.
Now, the Pentagon says the reason this F-18 shot down this Russian-made Syrian warplane on Sunday was because, called it and says, quote, the coalition does not seek to fight Syrian regime, Russian or pro-regime forces partner with them, but will not hesitate to defend coalition or partner forces from any threat. And the threat in the region is also intensifying, this time from Iran. Yesterday, it launched 6 missiles into ISIS strongholds in Syria, very close
We're not defining what we want to accomplish. What
but I
is
thought
the
we
instinct?
wanted al-Assad gone. I mean, hasn't that been defined?
It's aspirational, but then what? We cannot.
So we need in place, and there's nothing? Are you telling me, Colonel, they have absolutely no plan for this?
There is. I've talked to very senior Pentagon leaders, and we have not been able to achieve under the Obama White House and the Trump White House is better but not complete about thinking things through. What's next? Like if we get Bashar al-Assad, what next? We've achieved this for a lot of stuff there, but we have to figure out what do we wish to achieve and then seek to use all of our resources and leveraging other resources to achieve that. We have not come to that point.
One of the things that stuns me is that we've been around this problem now for a while,
right.
And we know that Bashar al-Assad is killing his own people with chemical weapons, and we know that he's not a good guy. We know, why do we know?
We're acting on it, and that's one of the issues, is that we're actively coming up against some of their own internal objectives regarding Bashar al-Assad. Now, there's been negotiations that we're now back of. Notably, during the Obama administration, John Kerry and our State Department got completely kicked out of those negotiations. We had didn't even have a seat at the table. Now we do. So some of this is really trying to right the bad policies of the Obama administration, and then at the same time trying to figure out what exactly we wish to achieve regarding stability.
Where does Putin, what his goals are? We haven't defined necessarily our goals. Are we just basically saying, okay, you know, Syria is yours to handle?
No,
then?
not at all. General Dunford, during his confirmation hearings 2 years ago, said that Russia is our largest competitor and threat. They really are. And the Pentagon now, as you've seen, is pushing back. We'll coordinate. We haven't shut coming. What we have to do now is, like we did during the Cold War, define what we're willing to do and make sure the other side understands that. We have to set up clear objectives for Syria and make it known what we wish to accomplish. Part of the problem is we're supporting the Peshmerga, which everybody thinks is a good idea. We're also supporting some of these anti-Assad forces, which was what was being attacked here, and you know they're anti-puts to deal with regard.
Need comes next,
right,
because
precisely.
Too often we get in there, we destroy certain regimes which probably need to be destroyed, but then we're stuck with chaos afterwards because there's no plan.
Tony Zinni, commander, central command under President Clinton, would often be asked, "Can you do this militarily?" And Tony Zinni would say, yeah, but then what? It's the then what that, Trish, we don't do well with, and it's something we really have to get right here.
Colonel Schaefer, thank you so much. Good to have you here. All right, I want to move to London right now. UK group of Muslim 40 suspect who is facing a terror charge. Let's go to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, who has the latest. Hi, Catherine.
Well, thanks, Trish. Two new attacks in Europe today involving vehicles as weapons. The most recent attack happened just hours ago along the Champs-Elysees in Paris. Investigators there say a video suspect in that vehicle. French officials say the attacker was badly burned and died at the scene. The suspect was known to French intelligence services and under surveillance. This is a special security category that only applies to individuals who are considered a serious threat to national security, and it's considered the highest level of warning. This attack happened just hours after police in London say a driver in a van plowed into Muslims outside a mosque in North London, injuring at least 9 people. Investigators say one man died at the scene, but somebody was giving him first aid before the attack, and it's unclear exactly what killed him. Video shows people kicking the man on the ground, the suspect, but an imam at the mosque says he and other people managed to protect the suspect. The London Police Commissioner said today that this is an act of terror.
You see people becoming violent extremists of any sort, however we can. Clearly, it takes more than just the police.
British media report the mosque in North London has really done a lot in the last decade around its ears.
The Dow and the S&P closing at record highs, everyone. You got tech stocks rebounding a bit as well. Check it out, up 144. Investors also keeping a close watch on Congress. GOP lawmakers considering canceling the August recess to get tax cuts done. House Speaker Paul Ryan will be setting the tone with a major speech on tax reform. That's happening tomorrow afternoon. And Neil is on it. Less than a week after the shooting, some in the media seem to be blaming Republican Congressman Steve Scalise for this tragedy. They're actually blaming the victim who is still lying in a hospital right now. Where's the outcry over this one? And imagine if anything at all was said of a disc. Then, who is going to come out on top in Georgia? The last-minute scramble for votes is on. As Republicans and Democrats hang everything. This just breaking right now, a big change. coming for Sean Spicer's job at the White House. Our John Roberts has the breaking news for you right now. Hey, John.
Trish, good afternoon to you. This is something that's been in the works now for quite a while. A number of weeks, really, the president down, and even though he has to respond within about 45 minutes with a full national plan for rolling out that the president had fired the FBI director. The president was considering this over the course of his recent foreign trip to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Italy. But now looks like it's really well in the works, and that is that Sean Spicer will now no longer receive a communications shop over here headed by a communications director. That was Mike Dubke, who you remember, Trish, resigned a few weeks ago. Sean Spicer has really been filling both roles in the interim, but now he'll be bumped up above that to a new position. They don't quite know what to call it just yet, but it will likely be a deputy press, as Sean plays to Sean Spicer's strength, because when he was at the RNC, when he was on Capitol Hill, he was always a behind-the-scenes player, working on strategy, as opposed to being the person who's out here every day ducking the slings and arrows of the media as they question him during the daily press briefing. So he will now move in the near future to a full-time behind-the-scenes role, even though the president still would like to see him do that and then appointed. So Spicer will be the overseer again at a deputy chief of staff level over both the press shop and the communications shop. So for Spicer, it's a promotion, though a lot of people were looking at this as earlier, at least before this plan came out, as Spicer being shoved aside. I can tell you, Trish, that's definitely not the case. He's moving into a more elevated role, and one the White House and the president really believes plays to his strengths. Trish?
All right. Thank you very much, John Roberts, everyone. Republican Congressman Steve Scalise continuing his recovery after last week's tragic shooting. But that's not stopping some in the media who seem to be suggesting he asked for this. Listen.
It's time to ask whether the attack on the United States Congress yesterday was for
Service agent Gino and media watcher Joe Concha. Self-inflicted? What did he mean by that, Joe Concha?
Scott Pelley. Let's make this clear, is not a reckless pundit trying to give out a provocative, shocking statement like we see in cable news every day. He is the anchor, or was, of the CBS. Self-action from any sane, sober American would be, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, the other thing is, and people should know this, and I've worked at CBS this evening, is those words are very carefully thought out. It's not as though they're just talking like we do in cable. They write all this stuff out. It's heavily scripted. Dan Messenberg, media, and the left are right now.
Well, the media is the left, Trish. I mean, I'm not willing to say otherwise. These people have grown up in schools of journalism where they've been indoctrinated in critical theory and far left ideology. I mean, that's a horrifying, embarrassing, disgusting statement to make. Self-inflicted, while a Scalise hospital condition, above the condition, and wait till he can at least stand on his 2 feet again. Remember, this isn't a problem on both sides. I refuse to accept that. There are isolated incidents of this on both sides, but it's an epidemic of violent talk and violent rhetoric. This is almost exclusively owned by the far left. Not all Democrats, but by the far left.
Look, I do think that the left has engaged in this in some pretty obvious ways. I mean, the Kathy Griffin, for example, or the Julius Caesar being Donald Trump and getting stabbed. I don't really think that the right is saintly as well. I mean, Joe, we have reached a state in this country right now where we have seemed to have lost all sense of decency, all sense of humanity. People are just on the attack, I think, in a way that has been completely unprecedented. But to see the anchor, the CBS Evening News, Scott Pelley, take that on and suggest that somehow it's Congressman Scalise's fault that this happened. That stinks.
One upsmanship, this is one downsmanship. And think about it. After the attack, you had President Trump calling for unity, and that was even applauded by Stephen Colbert. Yeah. The House Majority Leader, the House Minority Leader. You have Democrats and Republicans preying on the field. Politicians actually acted for the most part responsibly here. But harmony doesn't work with some many thousands.
With an assault because you know where the bias is?
Look at the numbers that we've seen lately, particularly from that Harvard study. New York Times. 87% negative coverage. CNN and NBC, 93% negative coverage of this administration. I get it's going to skew negative. When you get to numbers like that, it was me a negative. And
thank you for your insight. All right, everyone, the president is under investigation. He's not under investigation. Here's what we do know. This confusion is over the top. Does that mean it's time for his...
Have you been notified of an investigation? And the answer, as I said yesterday, is no. The situation on Friday that created the press coverage over the weekend was in response to a Washington Post story that had 5 anonymous sources.
Yeah.
So once
saying that no investigation.
The president's team playing defense, all because of a single tweet where the president said, and I quote, "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director." Witch hunt. If only he had listened to Neil, right? Remember this?
Mr. President, is not the fake media. It's you, scapegoat. It's usual to see that sometimes you're the one who's feeding your own beast.
Bottom line here, you got a whole lot of confusion over this case. So should the president just drop the tweets altogether? Or should he keep them going because that's how he connects with his and Madison Giassotto. Good to have you all here. Madison, you like the tweeting. I know you like the tweeting. You say it helps him to connect with his peeps, but doesn't it get him in a little trouble along the way?
You know, when we look at this tweet specifically, I think this tweet was meant to be satirical and really bring light to the ridiculousness of the fact that the president of the United States could be put under investigation for taking the advice of the same exact person that could potentially be investigating him. I think this is ridiculous. But when we go back to the general idea of whether the president should be tweeting, I think a lot of people always say, you know, yes, he should be tweeting because this is a direct line of communication between him and the American people. True, but I think we need to take it one step further in saying that we're in the 21st century, and I think part of this comes with the increasing use of, and I would encourage not only our president, but all of our political leaders to continue to advance with the times and stop living in the past. I think social media is going to be an integral part of politics moving forward, and I think our politicians should be using this.
I hear you on a lot of this. I think one of the challenges with Twitter is that it's so short, right? You get 140 characters and you got to get it all in. That can have us. You're not able to convey the nuance, right, of a particular discussion point. And I think in this particular case, he might have been just responding to the Washington Post. Sort of, it was like, if I am under investigation, I shouldn't be. No,
well, it's 140 characters. You can't hear tone in tweets, basically.
I have to agree. I'm glad that our president, I'm glad our president uses Twitter, drives middle nut, for example, ban. Now, it's up to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not it's legal. However, his base wants a ban, and that's why he was put into office, is because he's not following within the norms, the typical the normal political rhetoric and being politically correct, and he's willing to put himself out there, and quite frankly, mainstream media just eats it up.
The base wants to hear certain things, but the flip side of this is you've got a rabid left right now who wants to find him guilty of something somehow, some way. And is he running the risk of providing them unintentionally with ammunition?
Absolutely, Trish. We just heard from Neil. I'm sorry, was that meant for me? We just heard from Neil Cavuto that the president is his own worst enemy. I've got one of my favorite tweets I agree with is the one from August 1st of 2014, where he says, if you read my last number of tweets, only one opinion can be formed, that our president and therefore leader is grossly incompetent. Well, reading from his most recent tweets, I tend to agree with that statement. So yes, he is time and time comment and president. That's not what he intended to say. That he granted it's only 140 characters, but they'll put out these people and say, you know, that's not how you should interpret
and everybody
this.
says, oh gosh, if only he hadn't tweeted that. Madison, if you were advising him right now, if you were working in the...
This is also a way for him to stay in the future and continue to advance. Keep in mind that last year was the first time that millennials were able to vote in as large of numbers as baby boomers in the older generation. So the future is
to land in any hot water that we shouldn't be landing in?
I don't think so. I think he needs to keep his base focused. He's motivating people to continue to support him. And you know what? If the left wants to keep attacking him, they'll attack him over anything at this point. That's very, very clear. So keep it coming, keep it going, and keep the conversation strong.
I keep saying that he has single relevant. You gotta be on Twitter if you want to know what the president's thinking. Thanks so much, the whole team. Appreciate you being here. All right, from the White House to the People's House, the stakes are incredibly high in tomorrow's hotly contested special election in Georgia. Don't believe me? Then believe the money. We're talking about a lot of it here. And quote, my heartfelt thoughts and prayers are with the 7 U.S. Navy sailors of the USS money, because the congressional race between Republican Karen Handel and Democrat John Ossoff is the most expensive race ever. Our Jonathan Siri has the very latest on the last-minute scramble for votes.
Nationalists with strong Georgia ties to help them in their various campaigns. Over the weekend, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue and Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price stumped for Republican Karen Handel, while Congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis campaigned for Democrat John Ossoff.
With this election, it will indicate that people think many people will see the handwriting on the wall.
It's time to be knocking on those doors. It's time to be making those calls. It's time to be sending those emails. It's time to be making certain that you're asking every single individual that you see within the 6th district, have you voted?
The Real Clear Politics average of polls shows Ossoff with a slight lead of 49.3% to Handel's 47.8%. That's way too close. It's
the exact House in 2018. There's 24 seats they need to win. A lot of them are going to be these fast-changing suburban districts that Republicans have long held.
Democrat Ossoff is trying to appeal to moderate Republicans and independents, saying he'll work with either party to reduce government waste in Washington. Meanwhile, Handel is trying to rally her Republican base to the polls by linking Ossoff to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi and other late threatening announced it has beefed up security after receiving some threats as well. Now, this is already the most expensive congressional race in U.S. history, with expenditures, campaign expenses expecting to top $50 million. Trish?
All right, Jonathan, seriously, they're both spending lots of money. Why is it so critical?
It's critical for both parties. The stakes are so high. This race is making people do things they've never done before. I was just down there last week. And I met voters who are putting up signs for the first time, who are out knocking on doors. These are older women who never ever in their lives have been politically active, and now stakes are for the Democrats.
And this is the Democrat.
This is John Ossoff. This is the Democrat. Stakes are high because the money that's behind him, but also the energy in the Democratic Party. If he can win, that could help unite the party. That could help terms.
Okay, so the Democrats need this win because they're looking at the universe right now, and they're looking ahead towards midterms, and they're saying, we don't stand for anything. We don't have a platform. We are anti-Trump, but is being anti-Trump enough to get us elected? And that's what they're trying to figure out.
Well, here's what's interesting, because John Ossoff is running in a district.
70 has won.
Johnny Isaacson, Tom Price. So he's distancing himself from this anti-Trump rhetoric, and he's really campaigning as a fiscal conservative. I asked him, because Republicans are saying, yeah, he's saying all this stuff about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, about cutting spending. Really, and I asked him, are you being honest? And he said it's time to make fiscal responsibility less of a partisan issue. He is championing these conservative causes. It's driving conservatives nuts.
You think about this universe we're living in, right? Where Donald Trump wants to spend money on things like infrastructure,
right?
And you have a guy down there saying, no, we need to be more fiscally responsible. What I think it shows you is how political everything has become.
Yes, he's very balanced, and need this win because it shows not only that they can defend their home turf, that they can win despite millions of dollars coming in to be spent against them, but it's also a vote of confidence for Donald Trump. And when you talk to the voters on the ground, they acknowledge the fact that this is not about local issues. This is about what's going on in Washington.
Wow.
And Trump supported
and the Democrats in the lead. But if we've learned anything from polling, it's that you don't necessarily need to to buy that or believe it. One other interesting thing I think about this race is that you have a lot of early turnout. There's a lot of early votes that have already been turned in. That typically helps folks on the left.
Speaking of for turnout, because this is such a crazy race. They say it's unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like this. One county official said 55% could be the amount of turnout, which is just absolutely nuts for a special election in June when everyone's on vacation. So early turnout may just be up because people are out of town, but I think it's up because this race is unlike anything we've ever seen for a special election.
Shelby Holiday,
we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Now, just sad duty to report that our son, Otto Warmbier, has completed his journey home. Surrounded by his loving family, Otto died today at 2:20 p.m. We're going to have more right after this.
putting it down and knowing that, like, for instance, now when I get home from work, my phone goes into the kitchen, and it doesn't go. When I go to bed at night, I take my son's phone away. My phone.
Well, good for you. We should all make a commitment to that. We are going to disconnect when we go home tonight.
Thanks
so much. Thank you, Liz. We'll have more after this.